How you doing, everyone? Greetings and welcome to today's episode of 8 Bits in the Basement. So what I'd like to show you today is this guy here. This is my Canon V20, an example of the MSX1 computer that I got myself back in early 2018. And the reason that this computer exists at all is that back in the early 80s, there was no software compatibility between machines. If you had a Commodore 64, you were running Commodore 64 software. If you had a Spectrum, you were running Spectrum software, and the same for Acorn machines and all the rest of them. There was no way that you could save a document, for example, on your C64 and share it with somebody who had a Spectrum. Just couldn't be done. So Bill Gates saw this as a problem, and that's why Microsoft and the ASCII company in Japan teamed up to form a standard, which was known as the MSX standard, so that really any hardware manufacturer could follow what was laid out in this standard and come up with a computer that would be compatible with any other manufacturer that had made the same type of computer. Now, they could put their own bells and whistles on it extra in order to make it more appealing to customers and whatever, but the core standard would be the same. So things that they had to follow was like it had to have a Zilog Z80 processor in it. It had to have at least one cartridge port. It had to have anywhere between 8 and 64K in memory, and also would be running a version of Microsoft Extended Basic, and the ROMs would be the same right the way across. Now, what MSX itself actually stood for is kind of a bone of contention. Some people say it stood for Microsoft Extended, speaking of the BASIC inside in it. And other people say it stood for machines with software exchangeability, because there were machines created by different companies that you could change the software around on, or you could share the software with. But anyway, that's enough on a very, very vague skim over the history on this system. Why don't we take a look at this and see what it is and what it can actually do. So the Canon V20 came in 3 varieties. There was this French version, which I have here, but there were also 2 other versions. A European version, which was marketed mainly in the UK, which had a QWERTY keyboard, and there was also a Japanese version. But we'll have a look at this French one here. So straight away, the first thing you'll notice is all the text and whatnot on it is marked in French. But basically what we have is on the top left-hand side, it says Canon Personal Computer V20 with 64 kilobytes of RAM. Down here you'll see it's marked cartridge, and it says that it takes cartridges that are compatible with MSX programs. The cartridge slides in here, and the port, when not in use, is protected by this kind of retractable dust cover. Here on top we've got a number of chunky black buttons. So we've got stop, and then we've got 5 buttons that are assigned to function keys, and when used in conjunction with the shift keys, they actually give you 10 function keys. Here we've got our insert, our delete, and our home and clear key. And all in all, the keyboard is composed of 72 keys, including these 4 here, which are cursor keys, but also they're part of the MSX standard. So any MSX computer had these large kind of chunky looking keys somewhere on the keyboard. And they actually worked with games and whatnot like a joystick. So you had your up, down, left, and right using those. And the space bar was your fire key when you were playing games. Marked down here on the bottom right-hand side is MSX, to show us that this is clearly an MSX standard computer. And this actual model has a little green LED up here to show you when it's being powered on. Now, at the front of the unit, there are 2 joystick ports, but these weren't only used for joysticks. They could also take mice, and they could also take paddles. On this side of the unit here, we've got our power switch to turn the unit on and off. And over on the other side, behind this plastic kind of cache, we've got our second cartridge port. So this is actually exactly the same cartridge port as we were looking at here. And they can't both be used at the same time, because it's one or the other more or less on this. They're sharing the same addressing. Now, taking a look around the back of the unit, you'll see that there's a number of different inputs here. We've got a parallel port for our printer. We've got a cassette port so that we can save and load games to a cassette. Here we've got an RCA connector, which is purely for audio. So this could be connected to an amplifier, a stereo, or to a pair of speakers, and you would have sound coming out through those. And here, because this is a French version, we have got a SCART out, or a red, green, blue SCART out, including sound as well, to a TV. And that is pretty much all of the buttons and connectors on the computer itself. On the bottom, what we have is a sticker that says Canon V20 MSX, 230 volts, 50 hertz, and it draws 24 watts. Then we have a serial number, and it's manufactured by Canon Incorporated of Japan, with 4 little rubber feet on it. And that is pretty much our Canon V20 as it came out of the box if you bought it in France. So what we'll do is we'll hook it up to the TV, we'll turn it on, see what it looks like, and pretty much what a few games look like on it. So we'll get to that there now. Okay, so I've got my Canon V20 all set up and ready to go, and actually it's very easy to set up. All we have to do is connect our SCART cable from the TV port on the back of the Canon to the SCART port on the back of the TV, and then we just plug the power into the wall, and that's pretty much it. We're ready to go. But one little extra thing that I did was I connected my Maxduino device here to the cassette port on the back so that I could show you cassette games loading up. But anyway, to start up this system, we flick the switch that I showed you on the side. The little green leg comes on here, and we get a nice blue screen telling us that we're running the MSX system version 1. And here you'll see after we've booted up, we're running MSX Basic version 1, copyright 1983 by Microsoft, and we've got 28K more or less available to us. So this is a 64K system, but the ROM inside of it is 32K. So once that 32K has been loaded into memory and whatever overheads are taken away, this is pretty much what's left to us for writing our basic programs, which is respectable enough. Now from here we can type away any basic program like you would on any computer, but you'll notice down the bottom here there are 5 kind of commonly used commands printed along the bottom, and these are accessed using the function keys here. So we've got our 5 function keys correspond to the 5 commands, and if we press shift we get another few commands as well that we can use. So we've got more or less 10 commands assigned to the function keys there. But I'll just show you the auto one is kind of interesting to show you what that does. If I press F2, it gives me auto here. I press enter, and what it's actually doing is auto line numbering for me as I write my program. So I've got 10 here. If I type print and we'll do hello and I press enter, it automatically gives me 20. I don't have to type that in. So I can here use F3 to do go to, and we will go to 10. There we go. Now I press Control and stop to get out of this auto line numbering thing. I can list my program here, and I'll use F5 in order to run that program. And there we go. So that's using our little shortcuts and writing a very simple program using that setup that they've provided for us here on it. So that's part of the MSX basic system, I suppose. To get out of that, I press Control and stop, and that breaks me out. And that's just one of the little features of basic on this system. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a game on it. Okay, so I'm going to show you loading up a game on this system, and I think what we'll do is we'll load up Grogs Revenge, or BC's Quest for Tires. And the way we load this particular game here is we type run cas colon. That's it. I press enter. I can press play on tape, and that's going to find pretty much straight away Grog, and now the screen will not change. For the next 5 minutes, this is what I'm looking at. I don't know if it's after crashing. I don't know if it's working or not. All I can do is wait until the 5 minutes have run out, and the game should pretty much start if it's loaded properly. Okay, so Grogs Revenge has loaded up. We get ready to play her. So I could plug a joystick into joyport 1 and press the fire button. That had started. But we'll do it with the keyboard here that was provided by the MSX standard. So I press 1 to play a 1-player game. So here we are, get ready player 1, and I've got 4 tires left. So basically what I am is I'm a Stone Age cyclist, and I'm trying to go up a mountain while being pursued by a big hairy Yeti type guy by the name of Grog, who wants to eat me, or I'm not sure exactly what he wants to do. But what I need to do is I need to collect these little pebbles as I go. And the reason I need to do that is there's a guy at a toll bridge at the end, so I can get across to the next mountain, and I need to give him 100 of these little pebbles in order to cross. Now, all the while that I'm going up this mountain, like I say, I'm being pursued by this Grog guy. And here you can see he's also collecting these pebbles as he goes. But if I see him on screen at all, that's a life gone for me. And we can hear that warning sound whenever he's getting close to me. But you see down on the bottom of the screen, there's also a kind of a map given that shows our location and Grogs' location as well. So it's a kind of nicely put together game, but it was available on a few different systems. But this kind of shows off nicely some of the graphics that this system can do, and also you hear a little bit of sound as you're playing as well. There's no real music out of this particular game, but there is sound. Now, this guy is actually using an AY8912 sound chip, which is capable of good music and all the rest. It's just this game doesn't really employ it. But this is pretty much what we're looking at in this game here. I'm at my toll bridge. I've only got 62. I need 100. But that is Grog. That's how you load up a cassette game, and that is how you would play them using the keyboard. So growing up in Ireland in the early 80s, well, number one, I never saw very many MSX computers. I only recall 2 of them, and they belonged to the older brothers or friends of mine, so we weren't really let touch them without fear of being punched in the head about 14 times. But the way that they used to get programs onto their system was using cassette. It was the cheapest way, and really it was the only way that was kind of available in any of the shops that I saw where they were selling games. But the MSX also had available to it games on cartridge. Now, these cartridges are ferociously expensive if you go looking for them anywhere, because they really have become kind of collector's pieces, as much of this stuff has. But luckily, Mr. Dave 6309, a good friend of the channel, sent me a little while ago a package containing a number of PCBs that he designed, and among them there were 2 of these MSX cartridge PCBs. So what I've done is I've built up this guy here, and I've flashed a couple of 16 kilobyte and 32 kilobyte ROMs with a few games, just to give you a flavor of what the MSX was capable of, well, using cartridges. Now, so I'll shove it into the cartridge port up here. I've got Pitfall on this one. We'll take a look and see what it looks like. Now, the games on cartridge are pretty much exactly the same as the game you would have on cassette, because they're the same size more or less, and they load into memory in pretty much the same way. The advantage is, of course, that they load up an awful lot faster. And also, I suppose, the medium of cartridge in its plastic case is a lot more sturdy and less susceptible to be damaged than cassette was. So this here is Pitfall. We're controlling it in exactly the same way as we would any other games using these keys here. And for some reason, I can't get any cartridges to work with a joystick. The Grogs Revenge game that we were looking at earlier can be played with a joystick, no trouble at all. But any of the cartridge games that I have tried, I can't get them to work with the joystick for whatever reason. But this here is pretty much a straight conversion of the Atari 2600 Classic. And we're controlling Pitfall Harry here with his green pants in this version. And we're trying to find treasure. And I was never very good at this game, but you can see the graphics are very much the same as on the Atari 2600. Oh. And also it plays sound in pretty much the same manner. So what we'll do is I'm going to pop in Pitfall 2, because it plays a little bit of music in the background, and I'll give you a little taste of pretty much what this compared to the Atari. Alright, so here we are with Pitfall 2, The Lost Caverns. I press space and we start again. Let's start playing music as soon as we begin. If you can hear that. And of course, in this version, the main attraction really kind of being that you can swim as well. Whereas in the other version, if you fell into water, you pretty much died straight away. But this is all underground. We're picking up our treasure in the same way. And you'll see it's very, very much like the Atari 2600 version. Now, an awful lot of games for this system were conversions from the Spectrum, but also a couple of ColecoVision games were converted over to the MSX as well. And here is a great example of one. This is Donkey Kong Jr. and it's one of my favorite games of all time, to be honest. We're playing it in the same way with these keys because I can't get it to work with a joystick. And we're using our spacebar, as always, as the jump button on it. But you see it's kind of a pixel for pixel conversion of the ColecoVision version of Donkey Kong Jr. So yeah, we're little Donkey Kong Jr. here, and we're trying to rescue our papa from evil Mario. So pretty much exactly the same way. And we get past level 1 anyway, because I can at least do that. And there we go. So you see, it has some very, very playable games on it. In fact, an awful lot of them are very, very playable. But these are all games from back in the day, back from the early 80s and whatnot. And in fact, there have been a couple of new games written and stuck onto cartridge as well for the MSX. So I'll show you one of those right now. Okay, so here's a brand new one. Well, brand new-ish. This here is Invasion of the Zombie Monsters. I think I've shown it once or twice on this channel before, but with different versions. But this is the MSX version of it on cartridge. This was written as recently as 2017. So here we are again playing with the old keyboard because I can't get cartridge ones to work with joystick for whatever reason. But we're playing this little guy here who is trying to rescue his girlfriend. And his girlfriend has been abducted by aliens, and the aliens have turned pretty much the entire planet into zombies. And Moonlight or something, because it's nighttime, has given us powers to destroy these zombies, but these zombies are fairly good at destroying me as I'm playing it too. But that's a taste of some of the games that are available on the MSX, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them. Now, when it comes to cartridges and making your own, it's very easy to do for 8 kilobyte games, for 16 kilobyte and 32 kilobyte. I think beyond that, when you get into the 64 kilobyte games, there's bank switching required. So it's not just as easy as programming a chip, shoving it into a cartridge, and on you go. There's extra logic and stuff needed on the PCB, on the actual cartridge PCB itself. So as far as 8, 32 and 16 kilobyte games go, program them up, play away. And that's pretty much the way that works. So I thought what we do now, having had a little look, very kind of quick glance over the system and how to load software and whatnot, what we will do is we'll open it up and have a little look at the inside of this system and see what's in the belly of the beast, so to speak. So we'll get to that. Okay, so we'll take a little look at the Canon V20 on the inside. Now, to speed this thing up, I'm after removing all the screws. So I'll just show you what screws there are and how it comes apart and what we have on the inside. So to begin with, we flip the system over like this, and you find this is one of the easiest systems there is to take apart. In fact, couldn't really be simpler. There's only 2 Phillips screws on it, one here and one here. And once those have been removed, we can quite easily remove the top cover here, which is kind of clipped in place with little plastic clips, but it'll come apart quite easily. And you'll notice, you need to be kind of careful removing this guy, that it has a kind of a mylar ribbon cable here, but it's in kind of sturdy enough kind of plastic coated job, so I imagine it's not going to break all that easily. And then there's this little connection as well that controls the LEDs and whatnot on the keyboard here, so we can remove that also. Now, the keyboard is actually quite interesting too. If you take a look at it, it's an Alps keyboard, which is a high quality keyboard actually on a computer like this. And I think it's one of the reasons, one of the main selling points of this actual Canon version of the MSX was got a great little keyboard on it. But looking at the inside of the unit here, you'll see that, if I move it down here, one of the first things you'll see is there's this standoff here. And that guy is to actually give support and rigidity to the keyboard so that it doesn't kind of flay in when you're typing on it. So there's just 2 screws hold that in place, but it covers the Z80 processor, which is the brains of this system. Same processor is found in the ZX Spectrum and in the Amstrad CPC and many other systems at the time. Here we've got the TMS 9929. And this here is a video chip. Now this guy was used in the TI 99-4A and also in the ColecoVision. And this guy being a 2.9 is the European version or the PAL version of this chip. And if it was an American system, you'd find the TMS 9918 inside of it. Right beside it here, we've got our input-output controller-y type job, and it controls the cassette port, it controls the keyboard, and it controls also this guy here, the printer port on this system. Beside the printer port here, we have our cassette port, like I mentioned before, so that'll let us load programs, save programs, and it also has automatic control to stop and start the tape as needs be by the system during the loading of a program. This guy here is an RCA port which provides mono audio out, like I explained before. This guy here is our SCART output, or our video output, and it's actually connected to this board, which you will really only find in the French version of this system, because this guy here is our RGB SCART controller board, really, that converts the signal over. Now, it's generally held in by 2 screws as well. I've removed those to show you what's on the bottom here. So if I can remove this guy kind of easily, he's clipped in with plastic as well. He seems to be clipped in fairly well. But here at the bottom, we've got our sound chip. And the sound chip now, generally it's socketed here. It's not usually, and the reason I've socketed it was I needed this sound chip at one stage to test the thing, and the only one I had was in this system. So I removed it and put a socket in place, but generally this guy would not be socketed. So yeah, that's our board more or less, along with its logic chips and all the rest. Oh, and we've also got our 2 cartridge ports, of course. Over here then, we've got our whole power conversion system. So there's no external power block on this system. You just plugged it into the wall. It took to 220 volts AC direct from mains and converted it into whatever voltages it needed. Now, as far as I know, it needs a plus 5 volt, plus 12 volt, and a minus 12 volt, I think. And those voltages then were fed into the board here. And that is pretty much it for a quick overview of the insides of this system. Now, so that's pretty much it for today. That is my video on the old MSX1, and it's a system that pretty much since I started the channel here I've been wanting to make a video on, but I'm very glad that I held off on it, because in the beginning when I was first using this, I didn't think a whole lot of it. Now, don't get me wrong, I thought the system was very good, I thought it was laid out well, I thought the games on it were good as well, but the problem is, and I don't know if it's a problem with this version or this particular unit I have, but it's very, very slow to load games from cassette. It seems it'll only work at a baud rate of 2400, making it like half the speed that the Spectrum loads games or whatever. So it took a long time to load up a game and try one out. But since I've got my cartridge PCBs, I'm using it a lot more because, well, I can quickly program a ROM and I can quickly load up a game now, which is really a game changer, if you'll pardon the pun on this whole thing. But yeah, it's a nice little system. It's not my favorite system I have, but it's a nice little system. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I don't have too much more to say about it. Now, on jokes on this channel, I know it's a thing that I've been doing for a little while. I'm kind of after running out of Star Wars and Star Trek ones. So if you want to leave me any in the comments, throw them down there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a joke I heard a little while ago that has nothing to do with any of that. And what it is, there were 2 guys, Bob and Ralph, and they were working in a lab, and they were mad into their chemistry. Well, at least Bob was. Ralph was only newly starting. And they decided at the end of the day to go to the new chemistry themed bar. 2 of them walked into the bar, and Bob went up to the counter and he said, "How you doing, barman? I'll have a glass of H2O. Barman said, "No problem at all," coming right up. Looked at Ralph and he said, "What can I get you?" And Ralph said, "Well, I guess I'll have a glass of H2O too." Ralph died not too long after that, which isn't all that funny, but I suppose in a way he was retrobrighted on the inside. Yeah, there you go. No, I'm going to have to try and find good ones somewhere, eh? Anyway, that's it for today, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you all again very soon in the next video. Bye-bye.